Hey, good evening. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on the Thursday Night Hockey Show. Actually, it's just me tonight. Travis is attending a holiday party, so I hope he has a blast while doing that. So I'm riding solo tonight, talking about not much. I mean, there's big news. Don't get me wrong, but as far as the NHL goes, the last few days, it's been pretty quiet. So we'll recap what's going on over the last few days, what's going on with Omicron. um, Talk about the NHL, skipping the Olympics this year and the impacts going forward for that. And then we're going to talk about the World Junior Hockey Championships, and then a couple items of news. It's probably not going to be a vastly long show tonight, but just to get you up to date on what's going on in the world of hockey. So let's go ahead and talk about Omicron. Omicron. The thing about Omicron, the news is that it's not as if you've had shots, and most of the NHL has had shots. There's only a couple players that have not been shot. I think there's only one in the league that hasn't been shot, but he got the he got the virus earlier in the season, so he's uh, at least herd immunity at this point, or at least uh, immunity of some sorts at this point. But the thing with the Omicron is that it spreads fast, and we've seen with the NHL teams that have been hit by it. It'll start with one player goes on the COVID-19 protocol, and then next day is three players additional. And the day after that, it's like four or five players and a couple of coaches. I mean, it really just moves through a team. It's a very fast moving. I'll say it's kind of akin to a flu rolling through the team. On previous seasons, we've had teams have issues with flus rolling through the locker room. Um, that's kind of what's going on here. There's not much in the way of like really bad outcomes. There are some players that kind of linger on the IR, the COVID list for a while. Dustin Tokarski for the Buffalo Sabres was on for a couple weeks. Somebody on the Winnipeg Jets was in the hospital briefly for treatment. Nothing serious, wasn't intubated or anything like that. But what we're seeing is a bunch of teams had to go into postpone their games. At least three games they went into like a COVID pause. That's the standard protocols that the NHL will cancel your games for that week and then bring you back on if you show improvement during that week. But there were so many that were going into it. Right after our show last week, there was over the weekend, the NHL decided not to do cross border travel, and it wasn't so much that teams north of the border or south of the border were postponing games, which they eventually were. It was the worry that if you catch COVID while you're in Canada, say playing for an American team, you catch COVID, you're forced into quarantine. They didn't want players quarantined in a foreign country from where they play. They may be Canadian, but they'd be quarantined during the holiday season. So the decision was to postpone cross border travel, allow players to be home with their families, and those games we made up. As we got into Monday and Tuesday, far more teams, Columbus, was like Toronto and Vancouver now is Columbus, and several other American teams started getting put into COVID pause. And the league decided from the end of Tuesday night's games, they would go on an extended holiday break. Usually the NHL takes 3 days off, the day before Christmas, Christmas, and the day after Christmas. Um, this year, they decided to extend it from Wednesday, well, the end of Tuesday's games on to the day after Christmas. And it makes sense, but that wasn't the only knock-on effect. So now you're talking about approximately 50 some odd games, 52 or 53 games that now have to be rescheduled. The NHL season was already kind of a mess because we had the Olympics that were scheduled. We had the All-Star game. The season was already going to get pushed into late April, which is generally an NHL season will end right around mid April, and then start the playoffs, and the playoffs will be done by the middle of June. This year is going to start at the almost the beginning of March or May and run through possibly early July. Series goes 7 games and things like that. So right now we're looking at you know trying to fit 53 additional games into the schedule that's already been compacted. Now, part of that has been alleviated because as they were deciding to put the season on pause for the next few days, they have now gone to uh, they've decided not to go to the Olympics, which we've been talking about for several weeks now. The way that the Omicron variant's been kind of ravaging teams, and this is when the teams were not really in a bad shape. Only a couple teams may have had issues. In November, we were talking about the possibility of Omicron really hampering the Olympics. So the NHL, the NHLPA decided, hey, instead of sending all of our best players over to Beijing, and then possibly having an outbreak and having them quarantined for up to 5 weeks was some of the words they were talking about. 5 weeks of quarantine. um, they decided to forego going to the Olympics. Now, it wasn't a popular decision. I know Connor Hellebuck, the presumptive U.S. starting goalie who plays for the Winnipeg Jets, was not happy. He's not been happy how the NHL has been doing COVID. He wants a more NFL like model. Uh, so the NFL does not test everyone every day, and if you've been vaccinated, they're not testing those players, and only if you're showing symptoms will they test you. So the NFL today came out and said that, well, if you're not symptomatic, you're not spreading the disease. So I'm not sure I quite trust that. I'm not sure I quite trust the guys that tell you that concussions aren't causing CTE. Their medical opinions. So, but uh, right now I get his point that I think perhaps the NHL's over testing, and that's why they're finding all these cases of Omicron, because it is a very communicable disease right now. It's spreading very rapidly. It's not as tough as like original COVID or even the Delta variant, but it's been tough, and it spreads rapidly. And if I guess he's of the mind that if you're not showing any signs or you're not symptomatic, then you should be able to play if you want to, and not subject players to all this additional testing that the NHL has done. So Hellebuck was mad that the NHL decided not to do the Olympics, and I get it because he was going to be the starting goaltender for the American team, pretty decent American team as well. Um, this means the next chance for competition like that will, I think this summer they're going to do a World Cup of hockey, and so maybe we'll see some of that, but that doesn't have the whole cachet that the Olympics have. I know they've been trying to get this Cup of hockey to be the end all be all of international hockey competition, and it's just not. It's not the World Championships that happen during the NHL playoffs. Most of the people in North America really don't pay passing attention to it. Maybe if your team has been eliminated or didn't make the playoffs, you pay a little more attention to it because your players might be on that team, but there's not really much. It's more of a European tournament. In fact, they never play the World Championships in the United States or Canada. It's always a European tournament, so that's not a big thing on the calendar. Um, Perhaps they put more into this World Cup of hockey this summer, but we got to understand that players have been playing a lot of hockey, kind of compressed. With the original COVID shortened season, they played that playoff thing from August until October, and then we're back in the rinks playing hockey in January. Played up through almost August or early mid July, and then right back in training camp. So they've been playing a lot of hockey. I don't know if there's going to be there are going to be players that are top players in their leagues that are just going to say, I don't think it's really that the World Cup of Hockey is kind of cool, but it's not like the old Summit Series or the Canada Cup or anything like that. It's just international tournament. Um, But with that, missing the Olympics this time, perhaps that'll give more players the impetus to participate. The other thing is, I know ice hockey is a winter sport, but it almost makes more sense if you want the professionals to play, it would make more sense to put it in the Summer Olympics. Um, and I know you'll have ice issues, and a lot of these countries that are, like China is not a big hockey country. We detailed the travails of the Kunlun Red Star, which is basically going to be Team China going into the Olympics, and you know are the arenas set up well enough to support Olympic hockey? Now, if you're having the Olympics in, say, Sweden or somewhere in Central Europe, shouldn't be an issue. But if you're having it in, like, South Africa or Chile, uh, in future years, that may not be as conducive. So there are things to consider. But I would say that putting the Olympics, in or the Olympic hockey competition in the Summer Olympics makes a lot more sense as far as the calendar goes for the NHL. So it allows players to play this, premier, sporting event for the sport, great exposure, and not impact the regular season as much as it does now. Um, and it allows people to focus on hockey in a non-traditional time, summertime, to kind of whet their appetite for that regular season that's coming up. So perhaps that's something they should look at and work with the IIHF and the uh, International Olympic Committee to make that change. Um, so yeah, without the NHL players, the Olympics we played with kind of like 2018, where you're going to have a smattering of professional players from European leagues. Um, you're going to have a smattering of players, former players. I know Bobby Ryan, longtime NHL player, has indicated that he wants to play for Team Canada. So you're going to see rosters of a mix of old and new players that are not quite in at the NHL level. I don't think that you're going to see a bunch of like AHL players, for example, going over. You're going to see European League players. You might see some college players. I don't even know that you'll see that many as they did in 2018. Um, but yeah, this is going to be a interesting Olympics. I give the edge back to you can never write out Canada because they do have just phenomenal talent, even in the overseas leagues. Um, but I would say, these teams that are still playing over in Europe, uh, they'll have the advantage. So you're going to get some pretty top class players, out of the Russians, whatever they call the Russian Olympic team this year, and you'll maybe Swedish team and maybe the Finnish team will be a lot more competitive. I mean, 2018, the Germans, they're a good team, they're a pesky team at the international hockey level, but they're never really like medal contending team. They actually made the gold medal game, fell to Russia in a very entertaining game in 2018. So perhaps a German team comprised of their upper level talent in the German Bundesliga, and uh, so the Olympics are going to be entertaining, but not as entertaining as if you had the best on best North American hockey players in that league, in the NHL, AHL, playing for these Olympic teams. But you know, I will tell you, Olympic hockey is, you throw the crest on. In fact, I'm wearing my Team USA jersey, 1980 replica jersey. Um, when you throw the crest on, you're gonna raise your game. So it'll be entertaining. It'll be like 3 o'clock in the morning, but it'll be entertaining. Probably give me a reason to get up or stay up during the Olympics. Let's see. It's not all bad news for international hockey, though. The day after Christmas, which is in the Commonwealth of Nations, which Canada is, Boxing Day, the World Junior Hockey Championships, and this is one of my favorite international tournaments of in sports. Really, it's open to players under the age of 20. They had to have played for their country for at least 2 years and be a resident and all that stuff. It's a 10-team tournament. Let me say that again. 10-team tournament. And the interesting thing this year is that there's no change from last year. One of the things I really like about this tournament is that it has something called relegation. So if you stink it up in this tournament and you finish dead last, you go down to a lesser league and you have to fight your way back up into to play in the World Junior Championships, championship level. Um, they didn't have any of the lower division championships last year because of the COVID crisis, so they did not have relegation. So we have the same 10 teams this year as we did in the previous years. The great thing about this tournament is you're seeing a mix of drafted players. So some of your top drafted players on your favorite team are going to be taking part in this tournament, and you're having a smattering of draft eligible. In fact, there's a couple of 2023 draft eligible players that are very exciting and get a good chance to look at. So I'm going to go over the teams that are in the tournament and talk about their draft eligible players. Um, of course, in Pool A, well, first off, this tournament is going to be in Red Deer and Edmonton, Alberta. Alberta right now is allowing 50% capacity in the arenas. Now, this may change over the next few days because they don't want kids being exposed to all the fans and all that stuff. I get that, but for right now, 50% capacity at the Rexall play or not Rexall, it's like Scotiabank. Like every arena in Canada is Scotia something. Uh, in Edmonton and the junior hockey arena in Red Deer is going to host some of the smaller games. But in Pool A, so there are two pools, 5 teams in each pool. Each team play. They do a round robin in the first part of it. So each team plays 4 games in the round robin, and then they go on to a quarterfinal playoff uh, for the rest of the. They go into playoffs after that. So top 4 teams from each division go to the playoffs. The bottom 2 of each division are put into that relegation bracket. They play each other, and the loser is then relegated out of the tournament. In Pool A, we've got Canada, Finland, Germany, Czechia. If you don't know what Czechia is, the Czech Republic. They want to be called Czechia now. So Czechia and Austria. So uh, some of the young players to keep an eye on for in this group. There's several really good high end prospects for Canada. Shane Wright, who's a presumptive #1 overall pick for this draft. I know Travis is looking forward to him if Arizona can complete the tank this season and draft and win the draft lottery too, and draft first overall. They also have a young player named Connor Bedard, who's trying to break out. He's a younger player. I think he's draft eligible this year, but looking at him as a 13th forward, and kind of the extra forward, and he'll provide some pace as a young player, and they're not going to throw him in the deep end and put him on a line. And if he doesn't play well, then they can just not play him in a rotation and you know not be hurt too bad. So Connor Bedard, but yeah, Connor Bedard. There's a lot of good talk about him, and his draft stock is rising. In with the Finnish team, I think it's really going to be good. They're always a very pesky team, always in that medal chase. Sometimes they can even win that gold medal. They did it a few years ago with Rasmus Ristolainen, and it was a really good team that won the gold medal. But this year, their draft eligible players are Joaquim Kemel and Brad Lambert. I believe his dad is a Canadian that played years in the NHL, and then went over to Finland and finished up his career. And I think he stayed. So Brad Lambert is playing for the Finnish team. Germany's always a pesky team. Like I said, on the senior international level, they're a pesky team. They usually have pretty decent goaltending, and they're very lockdownish. But they are prone to having a stinker of a tournament every once in a while. But they have probably, I would say, the fourth best league in the world, um, like top division league. So the I would say the NHL, the KHL, Swedish, Finnish, it's maybe 5th. So, Swedish, Finnish, or Swedish would be above the Finnish league, and the Finnish league would be above the Germans. So, but they've got a good pro league. They've got a good system. They produce some really good players lately. JJ Peterka, who's with the Buffalo Sabres, he was young enough to participate in this tournament, but he's been in North America playing with the AHL affiliate of the Buffalo Sabres, getting seasoned here. So he's not traveling to participate in the tournament. And um, Tim Stützle, uh, believe he's still young enough to play in this tournament, um, but not participating in the tournament because he's with the Ottawa Senators. So um, let's see the Czechia team. Oh, or I'm sorry, Germany has three draft eligible players that people are looking at: Maximilian Glotzel, Justin Volek, and Florian Elias. Um, those three, maybe not first round picks, probably second or third round picks. Same with the Czechia team. You might get one of these guys in the first round, but David Juracek and Yuri Kulich will be the top draft eligible players for them. Austria, Austria is going to be a struggle. Austria is probably my favorite to go. I hate to say favorite to go down, but they're probably the favorite to go down. They don't have any draft NHL drafted players on their team. There's only a few later round players: Marco Casper, Vincenz Rohr, and Luca Auer. It's a very young team, um, so I don't know that they're going to be. They'll compete. I mean, they had a problem. They had Marco Rossi on their team last year. They had a problem competing, and were in the. They would have been in the relegation zone had they actually done relegation last year. Let's go to Pool B. The United States is in that one, defending champions. Their biggest draft eligible prospect is Logan Cooley. I think he's going to make a big impact on this tournament for the Americans. He's kind of where they're up and coming. But this is a very deep American team. Not as deep as it was last season. Of course, they had Spencer Knight in net, and he threw a shutout in the gold medal game against the Canadians. Um, it wasn't a perfect team. They did have some stumbles throughout the tournament. They lost 5-3 to Russia in the preliminary round. They looked really bad against Finland, and had a nice comeback to move on to the gold medal game. Yeah, we'll be looking at Logan Cooley. Derek Sanderson, a Ottawa prospect, is the captain of that team, and they should make no noise. But I don't think they're going to be quite as good as they were in last season's. Let's see, Russia. Russia is going to be tough this year because they've got a pretty experienced lineup, but they do have a couple of players that are going to be really, really good. This year, draft eligible is going to be Danila Yarov, and probably in the first round. Um, the other guy that this is the guy that's making a lot of waves in Russian hockey right now. It's a kid named Matvey Michkov. He is a 2023 draft eligible player, and this guy is turning heads. He scored like almost 20 points in the World Under 18 tournament last year in Texas, and I mean just lit it up. He may not go as high as if he was, just a draft eligible player. Word just came out that he signed a 5-year contract with the Red Army team in Russia. And so that'll have him there until 2025, 26. And, it worked for Kirill Kaprizov. He stayed in Russia a few years longer and really kind of developed there and hit the NHL ground running. But Michkov, This kid's gonna be sick, and it's sad that he's gonna lose like 2 or 3 years in his, 3 or 4 years in his NHL career, because this is a kid that I think when he's draft eligible in 23, will be able to really rocket right into the NHL. Um, but maybe he did see what happened with Kirill Kaprizov and say, you know what, maybe staying in Russia is the best move for me. I get to play against adults. I'm not stuck in the AHL, or I'm not stuck playing college or juniors for a couple of years. I stay here playing adults, honing my craft against the second best league in the world, and then I can come over to the United States or Canada and just dominate when I get it at the NHL level. Sweden. This is the most experienced team in the competition. There are no draft eligible players in this team. These are our, uh, for the most part, already been drafted players. It's a tough team. Lots of scoring, lots of offensive upside on this team. I've got this as the my favorite to emerge from Pool B as the champions, and getting the kind of that weak first round opponent in the playoffs. But it's I'm going to look forward to watching Sweden, as they have Isaac Rosen, Sabres first round draft pick. I'm also going to look forward to watching Canada, because they've got Sabres' first overall draft pick, Owen Power from last year, on their defense, anchoring that defense. So, um, but yeah, Isaac Rosen's going to be a good one to watch, and I think Sweden is going to be a very tough out for whoever they play. The only thing with Sweden is they always collapse in the playoffs. And can they get to the next level? Can they be the team that we think they can be? Um, it always seems that they just come up short in these tournaments. Slovakia is, a decent team. They're going to stick around in this tournament. I think any team in Pool B could have a bad tournament and end up in the relegation fight. Um, you know, I don't know how United States goaltending is looking. They could be really shaky, and there's some really good teams. The advantage for the United States is they're going to start off slow. They're going to play Switzerland, Slovakia, and then they'll close out with Sweden and Russia. So they'll probably get a couple wins under their belt if they play well. And sometimes the United States team does take a couple of games off, and they can lose to a team like a Germany, because they just aren't focused coming out of the gate. Today, the United States team lost to Finland in a pre-tournament game, which is not a surprising thing, because Finland always gives the United States so much issues in these tournaments. They've knocked them off several times. Uh, they almost knocked them off last year on their march to the title. In fact, they gave them a better game than the Canadians did. So yeah, Slovakia's got a few: Simon Nemec, Uri Slavkovsky, and Philip Mashar. All these guys are probably late first, early second round prospects. Um, so keep an eye on Slovakia. They may have a good younger team. They only have a couple of drafted NHL drafted players on their team, so um, they don't have the roster that stacks up to the top three teams in this division: the U.S., Russia, and Sweden. And then we have Switzerland. Switzerland's going to struggle. The thing about the Swiss have a pretty good pro league in their uh, in their country, so eh, they don't really have many draft eligible players that are really, you know setting the world on fire. Again, it's a young team. They've lost their guys that have been draft eligible, or that have been drafted, have promoted on to being over 20 years old. So to me, they're going to be just like Austria, and it's just like last year. Both Switzerland and Austria were last place teams in their divisions, and so they're going to stay. I think they're going to stay in battle for it. I'm going to predict. So my projections are going to be for Pool A. I think the Canadians win that division, just too deep. If they get upset, it's going to be by Finland. Finland will finish second. Czechia will finish third, and Germany will finish fourth. That leaves Austria in the relegation zone. In Pool B, it'll be Sweden first, United States second, Russia, who always does something dumb in these tournaments, will probably finish third, and Slovakia fourth. Going into the semifinals, well, let's talk about relegation. Switzerland versus Austria. Switzerland's got a better pedigree as far as these international tournaments go. They've been up longer. They've got more experience in that way. So I'm going to say that Austria is going to be the team that gets relegated, um, and they'll be replaced next year by France. France won promotion from World Junior Group 1A, I think is what it is. But we'll see the French team in the league next year. So for the playoffs, quarterfinals, I have Canada beating Slovakia, top team in the Pool A versus bottom team in Pool B. Russia beating Finland, uh, because Russia tends to turn it on in the in the medal rounds, especially against top competition. When Russia loses in the medal rounds, it's usually against like a Czech team or Austria or Switzerland, like just incomprehensible. They just don't take them seriously enough. They'll take a Finland seriously. They'll take Canada seriously enough. Um, and if they lose to Finland or Canada, it's just because they don't have the talent to do it. I think the Russians have more than enough talent to handle Switzerland. Will Switzerland's goaltending stand on its head like it always does against the United States? That's always the question. Um, Sweden will beat Germany, and the U.S. will beat Czechia. Although that's not always a given. That's always been a historically bad matchup for the Americans. Americans are much like the Russians in that they tend to discount that quarterfinal game early that uh, and get tripped up. They and the Czechs have done it a few times against the Americans. They've had it happen against Germany. I mean, not if they lose a quarterfinal game, it's generally because they did not take their first round opponent seriously enough and get sent packing without medals. But I think they get past that round and they'll play in the semis. I think Canada beats Russia in the semis, and the Swedes beat the U.S. in the semis. U.S. and Canada play for the gold, and I think Canada, you can always pencil Canada in, probably in that top one or two in each tournament. Every once in a while, they get shocked in the semis, but Canada just is a factory, and they just keep producing top level talent. The only thing that gets Canada is sometimes they put all-star team over putting together a good team structure from first line to fourth line. I think they've learned that lesson. So um, it's a second. It's a returning coach this year for the Canadians, and I think that they'll take that next step and win the tournament. That it will really depend on. I always have a theory in tournaments. If you play a team a second time for a medal, and you played them in that round robin, the team that loses is the one that's going to have the advantage going into the second matchup. So whoever loses between the United States and Russia in that first game is going to have the advantage in the second game. I'm thinking that the United States wins in round robin, so the Russians will probably win the bronze medal in this tournament. All right, so that's the World Junior Hockey Championships. Again, that starts on the day after Christmas, Boxing Day, 26th of December, and runs until it's a short term. It's only 2 weeks. It's a very compacted schedule. Round robin lasts for 6 days, and then the playoffs are done fairly quickly. And so be looking out for that because that's our next really good chance of watching hockey for the next few days. I know the NHL is coming back the 27th. The problem with that is I'm still seeing players getting added to the COVID list every damn day. So it could be a very touch and go situation coming out of the Olympic break, and we might see pauses all the way up until I can see a pause all the way up until January 1st. The big thing with January 1st is the Winter Classic. 2022 Winter Classic is going to be in Minnesota at Target Field, which is the home of the MLB's Minnesota Twins. They're going to have the Minnesota Wildfire facing off against the uh, division rival St. Louis Blues. That should be a pretty good game. Two top teams in that division. I know the NHL is very keen on getting that game played. I've looked, and there doesn't seem to be any arena issues with how many people can be in there. I mean, it's of course it's an outdoor event, so should be better as far as the ventilation goes. But again, COVID is COVID, and governments are going to do what they want to do, and we might see some capacity limits, which will be disastrous for the NHL because that means they're going to have to start giving back money to people who can't go to the NHL game. Um, Other NHL news: there was an arena deal in place to replace the almost 40-year-old Calgary Saddle Dome that has fallen through. And the main sticking point seems to be uh, there was a new mayor in Calgary who has upped the amount of money that's going to cost to comply with infrastructure and climate change costs. And the Calgary Sports and Entertainment Group that owns the Flames has balked at paying that additional money. Um, they say that there's still a chance that this deal might go through. Uh, I think the Calgary government has been very intractable about how they, whether they would waive that cost or reduce that cost in any way. Um, and the Calgary Sports and Entertainment Group has said, we're not going to pay that. It's and here's the issue: it's dead for now. They come back in 2 weeks or 2 months or a year and try and revive it. Those costs are only going to go up. We know that we're in a bad issue with inflation. We know that the Canadian dollar is incredibly weak, weaker than the United States dollar at this point. Um, that fee is only going to rise as we move on. And part of the issue was that there was money that was negotiated in the original agreement that dealt with infrastructure and climate costs. Um, but the raise that the Calgary government put in there was about 30%. So, I mean, I get why they balk. I get why the Calgary government is doing what they do. But, I know the politics of how that city operates, and I understand. Now, do I agree with it? Probably not, but I understand it. Plus, they had to have looked at what happened with the Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle, and it being fully funded by uh, the Amazon folks, and they wanted something like that, and it's admirable, but it's expensive. And Calgary Sports and Entertainment is no Amazon. I will tell you that right now. Um, and a final piece of news tonight: Wayne Gretzky has said that he believes that Alexander Ovechkin will pass him. I tend to agree with that because Alexander Ovechkin's still relatively young. I mean, he looks like an old dude. He's starting to get really gray, but he's only like mid-30s, and you know I don't think he's gonna. I mean, he could pull a Yager and play for another decade, quite easily, and be the first player to get to 1,000 goals. I think that's the stretch goal for Ovechkin is to get to 1,000. Um, but yeah, I think Ovechkin gets there, and I think it's going to be sooner rather than later. The only thing that's really hurting Ovechkin right now is this. He lost half a year last year to COVID. He lost half a year the year before to COVID, or not quite half a year, but 20% of the year to COVID. So he's losing games towards the back half of his career that could make a difference. Um, but yeah, this too shall pass, and eventually we will get to the point where we're gonna state that the get past the COVID stuff and play 82 games without any issue. And I think Alexander Ovechkin gets past Gretzky fairly quickly, and then I think he moves on and challenges 1,000 goals, and that would be pretty awesome. Uh, and I say it's more impressive than Gretzky getting to his mark, and the fact that Alex has always played against you know, flipping and flopping goaltenders that dive and are so athletic and so big. I mean, you think of guys like Andre Vasilevsky and folks like him, and Wayne Gretzky. I mean, you watch some of the early stuff that Wayne Gretzky, the night he scored when he got to the 50 goals in 50 games mark, well, 50 goals in 38 games mark, the goaltending in that, I mean, I probably could have got a hat trick in that game, and I don't even skate. So, um, it's just stand up goaltending and the way that goaltending is nowadays. Um, there's a reason why Gretzky had a precipitous drop as he got into the 90s. Even though he was still a great player, he was just the vast majority of his goals were up until he peaked and then he dropped pretty rapidly. Ovechkin, Russian machine never breaks. He's pretty steady, uh, continually getting that 50 goal year. He's not going to do a 90 goal year like Gretzky did, but he's going to continue to get that 50 goal, 50 goal, 50 goal. Um, if we can stick in an 82 game schedule this year, I think he's going to get close to 60. His season high is 65. I think if he stays healthy, there's a reasonable chance that he hits 65. But you know, uh, Ovechkin's just a stud. I mean, there's no other way to describe him. He's just a badass motherfucker. So anyway, that's the news for this week. Next week we will return with our end of year show. It's the last show of the year, calendar year, and hopefully we'll have some games to talk about. There really wasn't a whole lot of games between our last show and this one, so no top players of the week, no none of that stuff. It is just hope for the best at this point. Hopefully we start playing some hockey games. Hopefully we start to understand Omicron better, and maybe that because it's not it spreads fast, but it's not as bad if you're not symptomatic. It's not you're not having issues with it. That teams can continue playing, but I just don't think so. Not in this current climate, and I think we'll still see games impacted. That was one thing I was going to talk about the arena situation. So now with the Olympic break, we've got 3 weeks now that we can reschedule these 53 games. There's a couple issues that we'll need to look at with that. Is that they've only scheduled two, and I know known for a little bit that they're going to do this, but they're giving it time. They've reached out to teams to release their arena schedule in that 3 weeks. Now, people have been looking at arena schedules, and for instance, Rangers have had a few games postponed. How are they going to fill those games? Because Madison Square Garden is one of the busiest arenas in the world. So if the Rangers aren't playing or the Knicks aren't playing, they've got a concert there. They've got something going on, and so that 3 weeks is almost entirely packed up with events. And and the further complicating the issue with the Rangers is that the Rangers cannot play a home game in any other facility other than MSG, which is why a few years ago when the Rangers played the Sabres at Citi Field, the home team was officially the Buffalo Sabres, uh, even though the home team really was the New York Rangers. Buffalo was listed as a home team just to comply with the arena agreement with MSG. So some of these arenas, like Staples Center in Los Angeles, probably the new Climate Pledge Arena in St. Louis and Seattle, um, they're going to have trouble getting those dates open enough to get the teams to come back and make up those games. So we'll see what happens with the schedule makers. I hope that they can get them in. I hope that we don't have as many cancellations coming out of the holiday as did coming in, and the rest of the season goes off as normally as possible. Um, but you know, code is code is. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us on the Thursday Night Hockey Show. See you on Twitch and on my Facebook page and other on YouTube and on our main Facebook page. I really appreciate everyone tuning in tonight, and I'll see everyone with Travis. I'll see everyone next week. Have a great one, everybody.